Have we been invalidated before? You ever feel like that? Talk about like those feelings that come back of like, I'm not a good therapist. Like, where's that baggage coming from, right? Like,
This is what divides my work life versus my personal life.
as they say, the body keeps the score.
Welcome to another episode of Trauma Learns, in which we discuss the intersection of who we are, what we do, and the lessons that we've learned along the way. My name is Trauma, your host, and today joining me is Lauren. Lauren is a licensed mental health counselor based in New York and the owner of Clairview Mental Health Counseling. She specializes in trauma and grief, helping clients move through life challenges with confidence and clarity while honoring their values. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
If this season of life is a classroom, what are you currently learning about what it means to be human?
What a question. How to human?
Mm,
Just how to human from, I'll say, a basic functioning level, like as we'll talk and you'll learn about my life and all of the different things that we got going on. So often I feel like I have to have a back to basics conversation with myself about just like
mm,
how do I function and just take one thing at a time and
mm,
move forward.
mm. And what lesson have you learned so far about how to human?
These days, I am learning that fundamental self care is very, very important.
Mm,
I'm also learning that humans tend to focus a lot on the past and not so much forward progress, and
mm,
kind of get stuck turning their wheels and thinking about things that are not very productive. And so, like, for me, how to human is present day focused, and also where we go that way, we go forward.
mm. And so we have this next section called the learning curve. So we have of our audience members who put in some questions. This person said, "Hi, Choma. I lost a close friend and it's been really difficult.
Mm.
The part that's confusing is that it feels like people expect me to get over it pretty quickly. Because it wasn't a family member, it sometimes feels like my grief isn't being taken as seriously and people don't really want to talk about it. Certain things still trigger strong emotions, like hearing their favorite song or seeing someone that reminds me of them, and I start crying even though I thought I was doing okay. It makes me wonder if I'm grieving too much or if I'm supposed to move on faster. Is it normal for grief like this to come back so strongly?"
Yes, absolutely. One thing that I learned, this is before I got certified in grief, but just a piece of psychoeducation that I picked up along the way.
Mhm,
The average time frame for what we consider to be an uncomplicated grief, just normal reaction without any other traumatic elements or anything like that, is about 18 months.
mhm,
So, a grieving process that is considered normal allows for you to feel some type of way, whatever that is for you, for at least a year and a half.
mhm,
So for this person, I don't know how long it was that they lost their loved one, but any response to a grief is fair game.
mhm,
But I'm not surprised to hear that people have made comments about the expectations for that. It's one of those things um, that we learn as grief therapists where
mhm,
you have to kind of contend with all of the commentary that comes with people's expectations, their own baggage towards grief, their cultural expectations around grief.
mhm,
All of that can, you're not only just dealing with yourself, you're dealing with all those other people too.
mhm. So what advice or feedback would you offer this person in terms of like how to navigate? So one, I'm hearing like normalizing their grief and saying it's okay that you're feeling the way that you're feeling, and that everyone grieves at their own time. There's something that they also mentioned in terms of the friend component. Most times when we think about grief, we think about grief in a family context. Um,
Yeah.
and so, any feedback in regards to that friendship side of things and
Well, unique to friendship, I believe, like, first of all, the nature of the relationship is not so much as important as people think. I mean,
Mm,
you can grieve an animal as
mm,
deeply as you might a friend, as you might a family member, and so
mhm,
that's important to clarify. But when it comes to friendship, I would, really consider the rest of the community around that friendship too.
mm,
I believe that your loved one who has passed was also loved by a lot of other people
mm,
and shared in some community, and uh, that grief is shared, and grief is best handled in community rather than in isolation, and I
mm.
would really be leaning into that.
So we have our next person who said, "Hi, Choma. I grew up in a household with a lot of conflict and instability. As an adult, I feel like I've done pretty well for myself. I have a good job, I'm independent, and on paper, things look good. But I've noticed that in certain situations, like when someone criticizes me at work or when there's conflict in a relationship, I react really strongly emotionally. Sometimes my reaction feels bigger than the situation itself, and afterwards I feel confused about why it hit me so hard. I'm starting to wonder if things from my childhood are still affecting me in ways I didn't realize. How do you know when past trauma is still showing up in your everyday reactions?"
I think, first of all, if you are having those types of reactions, then you already know that
Mm,
your past traumas are invasive. They are popping up when you don't want them around anymore. But the word trauma is very loaded, and we assume, based on like the diagnostic criteria, that trauma means that it had to be a life or death situation.
mm,
And we kind of know that it's more complicated than that, and so I call them uppercase T and lowercase T traumas. So it sounds like uh, this person's upbringing, they had a lot of lowercase T traumas that
mm,
piled up on them throughout life, and so it might not be like one big thing that's bothering you, but probably something nagging in the background, like one of those little lowercase T traumas. So
mhm,
you know when your stuff is coming back up.
mm. How would you help a client who needs help trusting themselves, for example, in the context of the situation as it relates to those small T traumas and identifying them?
As they say, the body keeps the score.
Okay,
Or
that's
was
a
it
good
just a
one.
reaction?
Mm,
Right. Have we been invalidated before? You ever feel like that?
mm.
Yeah.
So we have a very final learning curve scenario. This person says, "Hi, Choma. I recently started my own private practice and I'm really proud of taking the leap, but I've been struggling with something I didn't expect. Sometimes clients reach out late at night or during the weekend when they're going through a difficult moment, and I feel a lot of pressure to respond right away. Part of me wants to be there for them because they're trusting me with really heavy things, but another part of me knows I need boundaries to protect my own time and energy. The problem is, when I think about setting those boundaries, I start doubting myself and wondering if I'm being a bad therapist or not doing enough. How can therapists build healthy boundaries with clients while still feeling confident in the care that they're providing?"
That is a fantastic question. I too struggle with this.
I feel like every therapist struggles with
Oh my
this to some
goodness.
degree.
This happened recently
Mm,
where I was put in a situation where I felt really obligated to respond in my personal time, and
mm,
a choice needed to be made of, am I going to perpetuate this idea of me being on call always
mm,
and create that expectation in our therapeutic work that every hour of the day I am available to you?
mm,
Or does this bond in our relationship include boundaries that allow both of us to take some time away from each other? So I had to really ask myself all of those questions and be like, now, Lauren, are you going to respond to this message right now, or are you going to make them wait the,
mm,
you know, over the weekend or on the holiday until the next available working hour to get that response from me. And I did,
Mhm.
and it was scary.
Mm.
And you did talk about like those feelings that come back of like, I'm not a good therapist. Like, where is that baggage coming from, right? Like, where
Mm.
who said that to me?
Mm.
Little voice in our heads. Yeah.
Mm. I love that. It seems like there's a lot of like almost like interrogating your thoughts and questioning like where is this coming from? Setting boundaries is something that a lot of, people in helping professions and therapists really experience, and it can be really difficult and it can be really tricky. I've also been in similar situations as well.
Mm.
And typically I wait till the next day or after the weekend to respond.
Yeah.
In grad school, one of my professors, she mentioned like when she works in the office, what she would do is like when she would come back home, like before she steps home, like she would take off her earrings, and that was her way of indicating I'm no longer in therapist mode. I'm a human being living my everyday life
Yep.
mode. I'm no longer like in a helping
Yeah.
profession mode. So I think maybe having those little indicators for yourself, whatever that is, of once I step into this space, this is what divides my work life versus my personal life. Because, as a therapist, have a lot of personal conversations with people. Like that's literally our work is
Yes.
intimate conversations. So sometimes it can kind of really blur the line, and you can like think about your clients and non-work hours and like being worried and all of those things. And I think having that physical indicator, whatever that is for you, can also be helpful of the airing is not on. So we're not in work mode right
Right.
now.
I love that idea. I used to have string lights up in there.
Mhm.
And so I clock in and I plug in my lights.
Mm,
And then when I'm done for the day, unplug my lights. And that was sort of my symbolic, the office is closed, the office is open kind of thing.
I like that. I like that. I'm still finding what that thing is for me. In all honesty, I've had a couple, but for the most part, I'm still trying to figure out what that thing is for me. But I think those are all really good examples of what it could be.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I
Do,
think it's really important.
I think so too. Do you like candles?
Oh, do I like candles? I used to be a candle person, but let's just say there was an incident, and
There was
ever
that
since
one.
then, I have not lit a candle.
That was another idea that came to mind. Like, you set up the ambiance of your space, and then
Mm. Oh, that's a
you gotta
wonderful
blow
one.
out the candles when you're
That's a
finished.
wonderful one.
Hmm.
That might be my thing. That might be my thing, especially in the future. If I'm like working strictly from home as opposed to in the office, because
That's a good idea.
I wouldn't be able to.
Let's not burn down anybody's office.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, like, how did you get into grief work? What inspired the decision to kind of make that a specialty?
The first certification that I got was the trauma one, and that it's fundamental. Like,
Mm,
everybody needs, in counseling, definitely a trauma foundation, because
mhm,
so many people walk around with a lot of different kinds of trauma. And
mhm,
then I noticed that there was a natural segueing into grief work, where in order
mm,
for people to really let go,
mhm,
release the things that were bothering them, they had to go through a grieving process regardless.
mm,
Which is to say that this thing does not go away. Like, there's
mm,
nothing that I can say to you that is going to take away or disappear this impact.
mhm,
And so you need to live with it, but it does not need to consume every aspect of your life and impede your happiness. And so that
mm,
is what grief work really is. And you notice
mm,
that applies to a lot more than just life and death situations. Like,
mhm,
you can grieve pretty much the loss of anything, the loss of
mm,
a job, or the loss of um your younger self.
mm,
You can grieve so many different things, and both of
mm,
these topics go so hand in hand that I was like, this is foundational.
mm. That's really a really good point to make in terms of grief. Because most times when we think grief, we think, as you mentioned, like life and death.
Yeah.
What are some like unique grief situations that you think that people don't think about until maybe they're in that situation as it relates to grieving things?
I remember during my training, there was a unit on all of they call it disenfranchised grief.
Mhm.
And these are just any situations where you may have lost something and people don't quite understand, very much to the question that we answered earlier about the friend versus family member.
Mm, mm,
Um, and so if you've lost anything in life, be that an opportunity or an experience, something was taken away from you,
mm,
a person, place, or thing,
mhm,
it was taken away for you, or you don't live someplace anymore. Anything that creates transition or loss,
mhm.
you can grieve it.
I'm curious when it comes to being a therapist, for someone who has never been to therapy before, what can they expect in the first session of therapy?
A lot of questions more than anything else. Intakes are boring. I would not judge your therapeutic introduction necessarily by that very first appointment.
True, 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 true.
I get this question all the time, and I tell all my friends, like, give it 4 sessions. You need at
Mm,
least one, I call it the tell me your whole life story in 1 hour
mhm,
appointment, where you're just answering about your past history and your medications and your
mhm,
diagnoses and that kind of thing. But
yeah,
then the next ones, you form your bond, you share a little bit, you get a little bit of feedback, start to put together where the work is going and seeing if
mm,
you and this person have a good vibe.
mhm.
And I would expect more out of those appointments.
Mm, I think that's really, really good. When it comes to setting realistic expectations for therapy.
Mhm.
And what I often say to my clients for the intake is, in some ways, it might feel like an interview.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to ask a lot of questions about different areas of your life. And this is to just kind of give me context about who you are to inform our work in the future. So just kind of setting that realistic expectations of like, it might feel like an interview because
Yeah.
it's like a lot of questions that I need to get through logistically, paperwork
Yes.
wise as well. So bear with me. And then after the session, you can have more autonomy in
Yeah.
terms of how the sessions go moving forward. And then some places have like multiple intakes, some places have just
Mm.
one intake. So I find that the places that have just one intake, clients are a bit more open to that very structured section.
That's true.
Yeah, whereas like when it's like multiple sessions of the intake, then it can feel kind of like, okay, when are we going to talk about what I
Yeah.
actually came to talk about?
Yeah.
And to just bear with the therapist if it is one of those like multiple intakes, because there's certain like protocols that we have to go through on the back end. Um, and I think also, as you mentioned, having a couple of sessions of like filling that person out before making a decision of if they're a good fit or not.
Yeah. I will say that was one thing that I really appreciated about a private practice setting versus
Mm,
I guess like a more hospital, more doctor's office. These are two settings that I worked at before where there was a lot more structure and a lot more protocol.
mm,
In private practice too, I do 15-minute consultations. And
mm.
so when, I meet somebody for the very, very first time, I tell them what the intake process actually looks like. So they're
Mm,
very oriented by the time I sit down with them.
they're kind of prepped of this is what I can expect. This is how it goes
Yeah.
down. Okay. That's really, really good. Um, when it comes to the previous settings that you've worked in, hospital and or you said medical
Doctor's office.
doctor's office.
Yeah.
That's different from a hospital. That is different from a hospital. Oh
Primary care.
yeah.
Hmm.
I just remembered something.
What's that?
This is technically my second interview of you. Well, there was a assignment I had in
Actually,
grad
I do remember
school.
that. I do remember
Yeah,
that.
because I was like, "Wait, I remember the details of this, like the context of this."
Hmm.
That's funny.
We've
Um,
been around for a long time.
when it comes to your experience, like in the hospital setting versus the medical doctor office setting versus like private practice, what is like a common theme and or difference that you've noticed in these three settings?
There are a lot of different ways that can be answered. I think first of all, the well, Huge asterisk around hospital setting. I
Mm,
did my internship at Albany Med.
mm,
2 weeks into internship, pandemic,
mm,
and is also an outpatient psychiatry clinic, and so there was a lot. First of all, just a lot going on, and the clientele, obviously, they have a lot of needs,
mm,
and it's a big kind of multidisciplinary team. You have like psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists and social workers all training in the same place. So
mhm,
that place was bustling until it wasn't anymore. So they're like,
mm,
we put an asterisk on that one because pandemic changed a lot. But in by the
mm,
time I started working in primary care,
mhm,
um, I noticed some similarities were just the structure. It's a big system.
mm,
Things have to operate in certain ways in order for them to make sense. And then by the time I got to private practice, I'm like, there's so much flexibility. There's so much freedom.
mhm,
There's just, it's almost like the room goes silent and you're like, is anybody in here?
mm,
And a lot of, need to find community and almost some direction and oversight because it can
mm,
be a little bit isolating, floating
mm,
kind of feeling.
mm. And when you say private practice, do you mean owning your own practice now, or do you mean working in a private practice before owning your own practice?
More specifically, owning, I do support
Mm,
another practice
mhm,
separately, in which there are people who I can consult with, and there are different levels of clinician experience. And so we've got some interns there, some limited permit holders, some social workers who I love consulting with because they have experiences that MHCs don't have.
mm,
So there was a lot of support in that practice, and there
mhm,
still is. But when you are out on your own and you build it all from scratch, then
mm,
you have to go find your resources in your village.
mm. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I think when it comes to being therapists in general, it can also be a pretty isolating work, because you're in a room with just, a lot of your sessions are pretty mostly individual therapy for the
Yeah.
most part. And even with group, it's kind of you're just working with yourself most of the time. So I think it's really, really important to find community as a therapist, and or whatever profession that you're in, people who have the same who are within the same profession, but also people who have similar lived life experience as well.
Hmm.
For example, if you're a person of color, finding maybe, therapist collectives for people of color, for Black people, etc. I think that can be very helpful, because community is really, really important. So we have another question. What is something about being a therapist in private practice that people outside the field might not realize?
People are not aware that every session, every individual client, I'm immersing deeply into one person's universe,
Hmm.
and trying to know everything that I possibly can about a person,
Hmm.
and setting them on a course for growth.
Mm,
So it is very in depth work for a lot of people, and
mm,
it's hard to really do that job justice, especially
mm,
when the caseloads are high and
mhm,
you're trying to provide that service for a lot of people in these like
mhm,
community settings. And
mm. I agree.
yeah.
I agree. When it comes to the systematic aspects of our profession, what are some limitations and or some strengths that allow us to do that when it comes, do you feel like our profession allows for self-care, though we discuss self-care with our clients?
I will kindly say not nearly as much as we preach to other people.
Mm,
And I'll speak for myself personally. Like, I will be in the mentality of everybody else comes first and then there's me.
mm,
And in fact, it really ought to be the other way around, where,
mhm,
the first thing that I wake up in the morning and should be doing is really orienting myself around my day,
mm,
rather than kind of, losing myself to the demands of the job.
mm. That is true. That is true. I feel like a lot of therapists I know, myself included, struggles with self-care, but I recognize that there's this chat that it's not a chart, but a concept called dimensions of wellness.
Mm,
And I learned about it in, I think, college. This was even before I was in grad school. And it's something that really resonates with me. So the idea is, I believe there are 8 dimensions of wellness. Some places say it's like 10, but on average it's 8. And that's like the social, the physical, the
mm,
financial, etc., aspects of your life. And I find that when weeks where I'm very intentional about doing as many of those things in those 8 lists, I find that I thrive the most. One, because I think I'm someone that likes variety. So the more I'm able to engage in as many of those, like my weeks are like, you cannot talk to me anyhow. Like it's the math is math and the calculations are calculating. I'm just kind of breezing
okay.
through. Whereas days where I don't, or weeks where I don't have as much of those varieties or none of them in terms of intentionally taking care of myself,
Yeah,
I don't thrive as much as it relates to my well being. As someone who, works in trauma and grief, have you seen moments where working through trauma and grief has led people to discover strengths in themselves that they didn't know that they had?
absolutely. I have a client in mind who um their trauma and grief story strongly aligns with self.
Mm,
And so while we're processing all of the traumatic and grieving experiences,
mhm,
identity is coming through.
mm,
And that's it's really fun to watch that
mm,
process unfold.
mm. Let's talk more about identity as it relates to grief and or trauma.
Hmm.
And identity, typically, the first thing that came to mind was on a racial level, but I want to kind of expand that definition of identity.
Yeah.
Um, what are some things that you've noticed when it comes to grief and or trauma as it relates to identity, racially or otherwise?
In a broader sense, when people have life changing experiences, either through a traumatic experience or you've lost somebody,
Mhm,
um, whoever you were before that event
mhm.
is interrupted in that moment that you experienced that e-
Like,
trauma or grief.
mhm,
And so now we have a process of integrating that past self
mm,
with the symptoms really that came out of that negativity. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So we have
mm.
to
That's a wonderful analogy.
push it
That's a
together.
I'm someone who like I love idioms or like proverbs. There's a lot of like proverbs in my culture. I'm
Yeah.
Igbo, so like I'm just very fascinated by them on like a literal level, but also like a what's the bigger meaning, like a symbolism sort of way.
Nigerians are poetic. I'm inspired.
Thank you, thank you. When it comes to your identity in terms of having parents from the Caribbean, how does that influence the work that you do?
In some cases, very directly, like when it
Mm,
comes to, I guess, really specific cultural information or
mm,
experiences. No further clarification needed. I lived that
mm.
with you. Um,
Yep, it's
and,
like a I see you.
and so that's very helpful.
Mm,
But also, I think even just my clientele can be quite diverse. It's not, I don't
mm,
only work with people whose experiences I share, but I
mhm,
also um, meet with people who are vastly different from me. And
mhm,
so I do find that that is also a point of just humility, of just remembering what you know and what you don't know,
mm,
and using whatever points of reference that you have, whether or not they're exactly the same, just
mm,
to unite and to
mm,
think about what you do have in common and how your
mm,
experiences can help you understand somebody else.
So I think being open in terms of um what help can look like, and this goes for like therapy but also in other spaces. I've had wonderful mentors with like different life experiences. Sometimes the person who is able to be most helpful is that person who you have a lot of similarities, and sometimes it's that person who you don't have that much similarities with, because then they can offer additional or a different insight to life that you need. Because in some ways, if you speak to people that have the similar life experiences, then there's only so much that, well, not so much in the context of therapy, this is outside of therapy now. There's only so much you can learn if our lives are the same, right?
Yeah.
Even with this podcast, as we were discussing earlier, the reason of not wanting to be focused on just like speaking to fellow clinicians is because we have similar information, similar background as it relates to like our professional life. And so that curiosity in me of wanting to like learn from people of diverse backgrounds and diverse professions and interests and goals, and I think is really, really important because different people can teach you different things and can teach you unique things. But that is not to discount, of course, the fact that having certain similarities can be very helpful because there's certain things that you might not have to explain. That is just kind of like a girl, I get it.
Yes.
I see you. I
Yes.
see you.
Yes, yes, yes.
um,
That's a huge value of mine these days, I find,
mm,
is community and group
mhm,
and collaboration, but specifically around, when I say diversity, I don't just mean, that cultural dimension, but diversity of thought and just getting
mm,
a bunch of different people with different experiences together to bounce off of each other.
mhm,
And I look forward to being able to grow that aspect within my practice, but that
mm,
I find so much value in
mm,
like a good group case review
mm,
where clinicians who have worked in all kinds of different settings come from a different perspective and
mhm,
say, well, hey, actually I was thinking about it this way, and
mm.
open up my eyes to something I hadn't even considered.
We have another question here. So, in your work, do you notice any common ways people try to cope with trauma that might actually be holding them back from healing?
Yes, it routes back to avoiding
I was going to say
avoiding the work.
avoidance. Yep.
And you can either do that really directly and just numb out and get really distracted and not even bother. And
Mm,
then I find that there are some people who um are ambivalent.
mm,
They are contemplative in their stage of change and kind
mm,
of one foot in, one foot out. And so they'll kind of participate, and then run back to some unhealthy things, or especially with trauma too. It's not that easy to break
mm,
yourself out of harmful cycles, especially if that harm is ongoing. I have a pretty good analogy for this. If there's a building that is on fire, you
mhm,
have to be very thorough about how you put out that fire. You have to run up
mm,
and down the stairs and drench everything, make sure
mm,
all the embers are out, and then only then can we go back and do damage control. And then, okay, now we take everything out of the building. We can't keep
mm,
it. It's burned, it's smoky, it's soaked in water, like we can't keep it.
mm,
And then we, from the ground up, now we repaint,
mm,
get the new flooring down, get the walls up, and then you can move the new furniture in. So like, here are
mm,
all these things that have to happen in between.
mm,
And sometimes we're the fire just getting the fire put out is it's a lot for some people. It's enough work.
mm. What would you say to someone who maybe has gotten the fire out? So they've put out the fire. They're okay in putting out the fire, but now they want to hold on to the curtain, or the curtain that's like, halfway burnt, or maybe a book that wasn't burnt but has like ashes on it. Like, what would you say to that person that's in that stage of like, I can put out the fire but not the next step is like, ooh.
Grief.
Mm,
Because why are we holding on to this burnt, crispy, crusty? Why are we holding on to that? And
mm,
sometimes there are very good reasons. Like, this was so meaningful to
mm,
me. This had so much sentimental value. This was my great 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 grandmother's.
mm,
And I simply cannot part with this.
mm,
And I would probably create some negotiations. Like, it depends on
mm,
how, what that looks like in somebody's life.
mhm,
we can't take everything with us, but sometimes we can take little pieces of it.
Mm.
If the curtain meant so much for you, why don't you snip off a little corner here that still looks good and put it in a
Mm.
scrapbook? That would be a good way to take that piece with you, and we're not taking this whole curtain.
Mm.
And that tends to make people feel better about that process. We don't have to
Mm.
lose everything. We can
Mm.
customize.
We can customize. I love that. We actually had another guest speaker who was like a curator and ac- archivist. I said this name wrong, but people who like preserve like history and that sort of thing. For example, losing a loved one and trying to decide what items does one keep versus what items do they let go of, do they donate, etc.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that in the context of grief?
I haven't had the opportunity to work specifically with someone who had a sentimental object, but
Mm,
one thing that I have heard a lot, especially for um some older folk
mhm,
who perhaps like a spouse passed away and they are
mhm,
really struggling to clear out those belongings from the home.
mhm.
Um, even things like medication that their
Mm.
loved one used to take.
Oh, I've not even thought about that is so, like, specific. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
wow.
yeah, yeah. And and just think about that item, daily
Mm,
routine. This is how I kept you
mm,
alive.
mm,
This meaningful object that is completely functionally useless at this point.
mm.
Um, at your own pace. Who is that hurting to hold on to this pill bottle for as long as you feel like you need to until you're ready?
I feel like now when I look at, loved ones, especially, like, older loved ones who do take medication, like, now I won't look at that medication the same. I feel like because now it feels like I'm a very sentimental person in general,
Yeah,
but that's something that is just like, "Oh, okay." But now it feels even more sentimental. It feels even more because that's I mean, it's in some ways, it feels like an extension of that person or a part of that person to some degree,
yeah.
and I've never thought about it that way. The little mundane things that we don't
Mhm.
think about, but in the case of grief, it becomes then this really significant thing of, oh, they prefer to use this kind of spoon versus that kind of spoon. And
Yes.
in your day to day, it's just like, oh, okay. But in the grand scheme of things, it then when you look at that spoon, it doesn't look this, it just hits different.
Yeah.
What does that tell you in terms of your work in relation to grief, specifically tell you about humanity and love and that sort of thing?
I heard this quote, grieve to the capacity that you loved. I do feel that that is true. And
Mm,
love can be found, like you're saying, in anything
mhm,
mundane, seemingly unimportant, but small details. I think about all of our five senses and how
mm,
that can come through in somebody's grief. And if you think about this,
mhm.
your nose creates a lot of memory. And so
Mm.
things like
You said your nose or your nose,
your
like,
nose
okay,
creates a lot of memory.
huh.
And so even things like smells
Mhm,
call back somebody to their loved ones,
mhm,
textures,
mhm,
all kinds of things.
mhm. I'm thinking what came to mind in terms of the idea of like textures or just different items that feel random. I think in some ways holding space for that. Something that I do is like taking a picture. I am a picture person. I'm
Mm.
very memory obsessed. I don't play about memories. Like something that I do sometimes when it comes to grieving is like taking pictures of things or places or like I would take a picture and when I have that notification of like 1 year ago, you were doing like, I love those. Like, I
Yeah,
cherish those so much. So I think sometimes taking a picture and knowing that I don't want to hold on to this physical reminder representation. But then if I'm having moments where I want to maybe reconnect, I can look at those pictures and say, okay, this item reminded me of when I was in upstate New York.
it's a good intervention too, like a clinical intervention to
Mm-hmm.
ask people to bring those things in with them. And, rare is it that people really give people the opportunity to share these little things that are so
Hmm.
meaningful.
That is true.
I've been through Google Drives of pictures
That is
with
true.
people. Um, just sharing in those sentimental objects. I know somebody is hoping to be able to bring those things
Mm,
closer to them, and I look forward to maybe one day being able to just
mm,
see, just take a peek into somebody's life and see like what kinds of stories come up, especially with those photos, and
mm,
even just being a witness to the emotion that comes up in
mm.
pictures, and being able to relive with them.
That is true. And I think in regards to back to that idea of avoidance, there can be a lot of like desire to kind of skip over some steps when it comes to grieving and giving yourself permission to kind of sit in that discomfort or sit and really, if it's important for you to like romanticize the grief, like sitting in that discomfort and romanticizing it and giving yourself permission to think about things and to laugh and cry
Yeah,
and have those different mix and complexities happen at the same time.
yeah,
What would you say about what happens after grief when people have grieved? There's still that loss, but there's still that sense of move forward moving as opposed to being in the past.
yeah. I'm sure you must remember, as you know, the 5 stages of grief,
Mhm.
and we don't so much use that framework anymore because it almost suggests that once you hit stage 5, like there's nothing
Mm,
left.
mm,
But I have come across another framework called the 6 tasks of mourning.
mm,
And so it rather than like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 and 5, you
mhm,
have some quests to do.
mm. Oh,
And
I love that.
yeah, I like it too, and it was built as a furthering past this 5 stages idea,
Mhm,
and ultimately all of the tasks serve to function as complete them in any order, complete them at your frame of time, but
mhm,
you'll be considered moving through a normal grief process, which
mm,
allows perpetual grieving and resurfacing. But so long as these things are done, we're good. And
mm,
so one of them, meaning making, and is a
mm,
huge aspect of that,
mhm,
and finding value, identity from the experience without erasing it is one of those tasks
mm,
where like that doesn't say how much you should be crying or
mm,
when you should have thrown this item away,
mhm,
but so long as this person's impact on your life has been fully integrated, then
mm,
you've completed that task.
mm,
Another one that comes to mind is continued support. So long as you have a support system that shows up for you when you need it in your grief,
mm,
that task is complete.
mm. Are there any misconceptions about grief that you see a lot in the work that you do?
Just, is this normal?
Mm,
And 99% of the time the answer is yes. The
mm,
only times where somebody's grief is considered abnormal where it is so essentially traumatizing and invasive to them, where
mm,
it's a complicated grief or a
mhm,
prolonged grief,
mhm,
where if whomever you lost or whatever you lost is feeling many many years down the line
mm.
as if it was day one.
Yesterday, yeah.
uh Other than that, though, like, every experience is fair game, and yes, it is normal.
Mm. Thank you for sharing. And our final wrap up question is, what's an unpopular lesson your journey of life? So I mean, you could talk about the professional, but also the personal. What's an unpopular lesson your journey of life has taught you?
To be brave.
Mm,
Starting a business is scary when you're a baby therapist and you don't feel like you can do anything, and when you are going through many simultaneous personal life transitions, and you
mhm,
don't feel like you talk about imposter syndrome on top of imposter syndrome.
mm,
um, we can do more than we think we're capable of, and I am
mm.
reteaching myself that every day.
What does bravery look like in like action steps?
For me, bravery has looked like taking my emotion with me, and
Mm,
not putting it in the driver's seat. We're not leading with
mm,
that. It's just along for the ride.
mm,
And trying very hard to put it in the back seat, maybe in the
Mhm.
passenger seat, and focusing on the task at hand.
Mm. So holding space for both, but not in a way where the emotions are overpowering the actions you need to take necessary.
In a perfect world, yes.
In the case where maybe the person feels like their emotions are overpowering that sense of bravery, what feedback would you give?
Personally, I hold steady, and
Mm,
I will allow the tears to come
mm,
through, the meltdown, the crash out to happen,
mm,
and then we pick up the pieces and we move forward.
mm.
You can't
Yeah.
prevent it always, but
Mm.
it's sometimes what you do after that matters more.
Mm, that reminds me of the analogy you gave about the fire. Turning off the fire first and then taking out the burnt pieces out before you can then talk about remodeling or repainting or that sort of thing. So, in some ways, you might have that time where you might have that crash and it's okay to have that. And sometimes you need to have that of like taking the fire out before you can then have the process of like taking things out, of then being able to say, how can I hold space for both the emotion and the actions I need to take to then get to that place of, okay, now it's like action mode, but this emotion is here, but it's not at the driver's seat. And sometimes it's like that process, and it's okay. I have that process very often, and it's
Hmm.
okay to have that process as long as you come out of the other side being brave. If it's something that you really, really want to do, and if it's something that's not causing harm to yourself or to someone else, it's given, go for it. Thank you so, 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 so much for your time. I'm very, very grateful for this conversation. I've learned a lot as it relates to grief. And thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. Any last words before we wrap up?
This was really fun.
Thank you. And also, can you tell us about the earring really quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah, my friend Francesca is a, I'll call her a multimodal artist,
Mm-hmm.
and she is a fantastic drawer and like painter, watercolor, and creator of little earrings. She sold these for a brief time and no longer sells earrings anymore, but that was something
Mm-hmm.
that she did creatively,
Mm-hmm.
and authored a self-help book,
Mm-hmm.
um, and has just done a lot of great creative things. So I really like supporting her. And these earrings are amazing, and they get so many compliments.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that she makes is just gorgeous. So
Thank you, thank you. That
yeah,
looks lovely. I love the color combination. I love the flowers. That looks lovely. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Trema Learns, and we look forward to seeing you in future episodes as well.